My name is Shahira Kadir, and for a long time I saw Islam as the only truth. It was my foundation, my identity, my whole world. Until one verse completely changed my perspective. I was taught to never question. Islam was perfect, the Quran was absolute. Then one day, I found a verse that deeply disturbed me. It wasn't some outside criticism, it was right there, in the book I had trusted my whole life. What made this verse so different? Why did it make me rethink everything I believed? What happened next changed my life forever. If you are struggling with doubts or have ever felt like something wasn't quite right, I want to share my journey with you. But before we continue, please subscribe so you don't miss any of my important videos. Comment "I subscribe" below, and I'll personally welcome you to our community. Let's begin. I grew up in a deeply devoted Muslim family, where faith wasn't just a belief, it was our whole life. From the time I could talk, I was taught to recite verses from the Quran. My parents made sure I understood that Islam was the absolute truth, the only way to God, and questioning it wasn't an option. Every day, I prayed 5 times, bowing in complete submission. I fasted during Ramadan, memorized the surahs, and wore my hijab with pride, convinced it was my duty as a Muslim woman. In our home, everything revolved around Islam. We celebrated Eid with joy, stayed away from anything considered forbidden, and followed every rule to the letter. I found comfort in the routine, the certainty, and the sense of belonging that came with being part of a larger community. I never thought to challenge what I was taught. Islam was perfect, beyond any doubt, and I was sure I possessed the truth while everyone else was lost. I remember looking at Christians, Hindus, and atheists with pity, believing they were misguided for rejecting the truth of Islam. Whenever doubts tried to creep in, I silenced them with more prayers and recitations from the Quran. Deep down, I truly believed Islam held all the answers. At least, that was my belief until everything changed. It happened on an ordinary day, a day I never expected would alter the course of my life. I was in my room, flipping through the Quran as I had countless times before. But this time, my eyes landed on a verse I had never truly noticed or fully thought about. There was something different, like it demanded my full attention. The verse from Surah An-Nisa, 434, mentioned that men are protectors of women and in certain cases, even allowed a husband to hit his wife. I read it over and over. My heart started to race. Hit them. Those words shocked me. I had always believed that Islam was a religion of peace, that it upheld justice, especially for women. Yet here it was, allowing a husband to hit his wife. I tried to calm myself, wondering if I was misinterpreting it, or if the translation was wrong. Maybe there was a deeper meaning that scholars understood, but I didn't. I frantically searched for different interpretations, hoping to find an explanation that would ease my troubled mind. But no matter the source, the message remained the same. Some scholars softened the language, suggesting it meant only a light tap, while others defended it as a necessary disciplinary measure. Yet inside, I felt there was something deeply wrong. I desperately wanted to dismiss what I had read, to push it aside like other difficult questions, but this time I couldn't. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. If Islam truly honored women, why would it allow even a small act of violence? How could a just and merciful God sanction this? And if I had overlooked this verse for so long, what else had I missed? That was the moment the first crack formed in the foundation of my faith. Once that crack appeared, it widened. I couldn't keep my doubts to myself. The weight was too heavy, and I needed answers. So I did what I was always taught. I turned to those considered more knowledgeable. First, I approached my mother, carefully choosing my words so as not to appear doubtful. "Mom, I read something in the Quran today about husbands disciplining their wives. What does it really mean?" She barely looked up from her work. "It means exactly what it says. A husband has authority over his wife. If she disrespects him, he has the right to correct her." Her casual response sent chills down my spine. I pressed further. "But why would Allah allow a man to hit his wife? Doesn't that conflict with justice?" Finally, she looked up and said, "Shahira, you lack understanding. You're too young to question these things. Allah's wisdom is beyond us. We simply have to obey." That answer wasn't enough. I needed something more than blind obedience. So I sought out an imam after Friday prayers, hoping he would provide a deeper insight. "Sheikh, I've been reading Surah An-Nisa 434, and I don't understand why it allows a man to hit his wife." He smiled patiently and replied, "Sister, don't be confused by Western ideas. Islam grants women rights like no other faith. This verse isn't about abuse, but discipline. And even then, it's a last resort. meant to be symbolic rather than harmful. Trust in Allah's wisdom. I politely nodded, but inside, I was still uneasy. If it was truly about discipline, why involve any physical force? How could a loving God approve of even a symbolic act of violence? As much as I wanted to be reassured, their answer didn't comfort me. I kept asking, hoping someone could give me the reassurance I longed for. But every answer was the same. You don't fully understand. Trust in Allah and don't ask too many questions. They told me I was thinking too much like a Westerner. Islam is perfect, and my doubts were nothing but the whispers of Satan. Yet deep down, I knew it wasn't Satan, but my conscience, the truth trying to surface. And the more I searched for answers, the more I realized something wasn't right. That unsettling verse was just the beginning. My mind overflowed with questions I had never dared to ask before. If that verse could bother me so much, what other parts of the Quran had I overlooked? Who is the real author of the Quran? Was it the unaltered word of God, or a product shaped by human hands? The deeper I delved, the more contradictions I uncovered. Islam teaches that the Quran is perfect, unchanging, and God's final revelation. But if that were true, why are there multiple interpretations and even contradictions? Why do some verses preach peace while others seem to sanction violence? How does Islam claim to honor women, yet allow for their subjugation? And then there was the question I never imagined I'd ask. Why is Jesus treated so differently in Islam compared to Christianity? Growing up, I was told Jesus was simply a prophet, nothing more. Yet, as I read, I realized Jesus was portrayed as unique. No other prophet was born of a virgin. No other prophet was called the Word of God. No other prophet performed miracles like Jesus. Yet Islam reduced him to a mere messenger. Why? I couldn't stop researching. I started reading Christian texts and comparing them to the Quran. I listened to testimonies of former Muslims who had taken this journey before me. They were people who had believed like me, but who had discovered something greater. I listened to Christian apologists explain the historical accuracy of the Bible and present compelling evidence for Jesus' divinity. The more I learned, the more the very foundations of Islam began to crumble beneath me. What if I had been wrong all along? What if the truth I clung to wasn't the truth at all? I reached a breaking point. The weight of my doubts, my questions, and my fears became unbearable. If Islam wasn't the truth, then what was? Was there even a God? The thought of abandoning everything I had ever known was terrifying. My family, my community, my entire identity was wrapped up in Islam. Leaving it would mean losing everything. Yet within me, something was stirring. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly seek truth. Not just to defend what I had been taught, but to open my heart to whatever truth might be out there. I whispered a desperate prayer, unsure of who might answer. God, if you exist, reveal the truth to me. Then something happened that I will never forget. One night, I had a dream so vivid and real that I woke up trembling. In the dream, I was wandering in complete darkness, unable to find my way. Fear gripped me as I felt utterly alone. Then in the distance, I saw a figure bathed in a light so bright and pure that it cut through the darkness. As it drew closer, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, love, and security. I tried to make out its face, but the light was too intense. Yet, deep in my spirit, I knew who it was. It was Jesus. Without uttering a word, he communicated directly to my soul. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I woke up gasping for air, my heart pounding as those words echoed in my mind. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I had heard them before, spoken by Christians in the Bible. But why would I hear them now? Why would Jesus reach out to me, a Muslim woman, in my deepest moment of doubt? That was the turning point. I could no longer ignore what was happening. Jesus was calling me, and for the first time, I was ready to listen. Ever since that night, I couldn't ignore what had happened. Jesus had reached out to me in a way I never expected, especially with all the confusion I was feeling. Yet, I still had so many questions. Who exactly was Jesus? Was he simply a prophet, as Islam claimed? Or was he so much more? I started reading the Bible, not to argue with it, but to truly understand it. What I discovered left me speechless. Jesus wasn't just another rule giver. He was love in human form. He healed the sick, forgave sinners, and welcomed those who felt left out. He never demanded blind obedience. Instead, he invited people to come to him in faith. Instead of telling husbands to mistreat their wives, he told them to love them like Christ loves the church, with a selfless and sacrificial love. Instead of supporting violence, he taught his followers to love their enemies and pray for those who hurt them. With every page, my heart softened. For years, I had feared a distant God, always watching, ready to judge and punish. But Jesus showed me a God of love, a Father who wasn't waiting to condemn me but to save me, a God who didn't require endless rituals or a pursuit of perfection, but simply asked me to trust in his grace. For the first time, I felt a peace that Islam had never given me. No more fear of not being good enough. No more pressure to earn God's favor through perfect behavior. Jesus had already made the ultimate sacrifice, paving the way for me, and in him, I finally found freedom. Yet as the truth about Jesus filled my heart, a new fear emerged. What would happen if I left Islam? I knew all too well the cost of such a decision. Leaving Islam wasn't simply changing religions. It meant risking everything: my family, my community, even my safety. I had seen what happened to others who had taken this path. Some were shunned, others threatened, and some even lost their lives. I thought of my parents, the crushing disappointment and pain they would feel. Would they disown me? Would they ever speak to me again? The thought was unbearable. For weeks I wrestled with this fear. I prayed, I cried, I begged for guidance. And every time doubt crept in, I heard that echo. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I couldn't ignore what I had seen. I couldn't unhear what my heart now knew. Then I realized I had lived in fear my whole life. Fear of asking questions, fear of failing, fear of not being enough for God. But Jesus didn't bring fear, he offered freedom. And so, I made my decision. Whatever the cost, I would follow him. When I finally told my family, it was far more painful than I had imagined. My mother sobbed uncontrollably. My father's face hardened with anger, and my brothers refused to speak to me. I was called a disgrace, a traitor, a fool seduced by Western influence. Some relatives cut me off completely. The pain was agonizing, yet in the midst of that suffering, I felt something divine. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't alone. The truth had set me free. And even though I lost so much, I gained something far greater. I found the one who would never leave me, the one who loved me before I even knew him. Whatever happens, I know that following Jesus is worth every sacrifice. If you're watching this video and questioning everything you've ever believed, know that you are not alone. I understand how terrifying it is to doubt what you've always known, but let me tell you something that changed my life. Truth isn't afraid of scrutiny. If something is real, it welcomes questions instead of demanding blind obedience. It invites you to seek, to investigate, to knock. And Jesus promised that those who seek will find. I never imagined leaving Islam. I never thought I'd be here sharing my story. But when I sincerely asked God for truth, he led me to Jesus, the only one who could fill the emptiness in my soul, the only one who could give me the peace I had been searching for my entire life. If you too are searching, I encourage you to keep going. Dive into studying the Bible, ask the tough questions, and most importantly, pray. Ask God to reveal the truth to you, and I promise he will. One verse made me question everything, but ultimately led me to Jesus. If this video has touched you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other essential testimonies. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and comment "I subscribe" below so I can personally welcome you to our community. Remember, you are not alone. Keep seeking truth because it will set you free.